They took the house, they took the farm, they took every dollar in Earl Tate's savings. And they laughed. They laughed when they handed his grandson a mill sitting under 60 feet of lake water. $8, Dale said. That was the price on the deed. Wade signed it anyway. Nobody in that room knew the old man had hidden something under the third millstone. 40 years he waited, waiting for the water to finally go down. And then one dry summer it did. Let me take you back 3 months. To a folding chair in a lawyer's office in Cane Hollow, Tennessee. Wade Tate was 24 years old. He owned a duffel bag, a wristwatch that used to be his grandfather's, and 8 crumpled dollars folded into his shirt pocket. He sat very still. He had learned over the last 6 weeks that sitting still cost nothing. The house goes to Dale and Brenda, the lawyer said. He read it like a grocery list, the Route 56 acreage. Also Dale and Brenda, the farmers' national accounts, closed and dispersed to Dale and Brenda. Dale Tate nodded along, like a man confirming an order at a drive-through window. He was 51, thick through the middle, with a haircut that cost more than Wade's whole outfit. Brenda sat beside him in a blazer the colour of a stop sign. She was already checking her phone. And to Wade Tate, the lawyer said, grandson of the deceased, the mill property on Pardee Lake, parcel 409, also known as Tate's Mill. Dale actually smiled. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. He slid it down the table like he was dealing a card nobody wanted. That's the deed, Dale said. $8 is what we're asking for it. Consider it a gift, Wade. Nobody else would take it off the estate for $1 more. The room laughed. Not loud, just enough. Brenda's mouth curled at one corner. The lawyer looked down at his folder to keep from joining in. Wade looked at the paper. Tate's Mill, it said. Underwater since 1951. Condemned by the county in 1968. Assessed value, negligible. I'll take it, Wade said. Dale blinked, like he'd expected an argument, or at least a little dignity to push back against. You understand there's nothing there, it's a mill. Under a lake, has been for 70 years. I understand, Wade said. He folded the deed into his shirt pocket, next to the $8. He did not raise his voice. He had learned that too the last 6 weeks, from a man who never raised his either. Earl Tate raised Wade from the time Wade was 6. A highway accident took both of Wade's parents that year, on a rainy stretch outside Knoxville. Earl never talked about it much. He fixed the porch step that same week instead. Like the house needed steadying more than the boy did. He let Wade help him hold the level. That was Earl's way. Work first. Grief later, if ever. Wade grew up hearing about the mill the way other kids heard about a war their grandfather fought in. Distant, half legend. Mostly silence. Earl kept one photograph of it in a drawer, black and white. A squat stone building with a wheel and a mill race. The Caney Fork ran fast and shallow in front of it. 1949, someone had written on the back, in pencil. They drowned it in 51, Earl told him once, the only time he ever explained it. Built the dam 3 miles down. The lake came up over everything. My daddy's mill. Gone in a season. Didn't they pay you for it? Wade asked. He was maybe 9, sitting on the tailgate of Earl's truck. They paid what they wanted to pay, Earl said. I kept what mattered. And that was the end of the conversation, the way most of Earl's conversations ended. A sentence that sounded finished, but wasn't. Earl Tate died 9 years later, quietly, in his sleep, in the house Dale now owned outright. Wade was 15. He remembered the funeral more clearly than he remembered most of the years after it. The small crowd. The reverend who barely knew Earl. One old man near the back who cried without trying to hide it. Wade didn't know his name then. He knew it now. Hollis Pruitt. But that came later. For 9 years after the funeral, Wade lived with Dale and Brenda. Out of obligation, he understood later. Not love. He finished high school. He got into East Tennessee State on grants and a work-study job, cleaning the engineering labs at 6 in the morning. He graduated in May with a mechanical engineering degree and a resume that impressed exactly nobody. Impressive degrees from state schools compete with impressive degrees from everywhere else. The economy that spring was not in a generous mood. By June, his student sublet ended. By July, he was sleeping in the back of a 2009 Ford Ranger. 211,000 miles on it. He parked in different lots around Elizabethton, so nobody would notice the same truck 2 nights running. He had $41 the day the estate lawyer called him about Earl's will. At the Sunoco on Route 56, the morning after the reading, a woman's minivan wouldn't turn over. Wade was filling his tank with the last of that $41, watching the numbers climb too fast. He heard her cursing quietly under the hood. He walked over without being asked. "Mind if I take a look?" "You a mechanic?" she said, more hopeful than suspicious. "No, ma'am, engineer, but I grew up watching a man who could fix anything with a coffee can of spare bolts." He popped the hood, found the corroded battery terminal in under a minute, cleaned it with the edge of a rag and a splash of the woman's own soda. That was the trick Earl taught him. The acid in it cut right through corrosion. The van started. The woman tried to hand him a 20. "No, ma'am," Wade said. "My grandfather never took $1 for a 5-minute favour. I'm not about to start." She looked at him a long moment, like she was trying to place something. "You're Earl Tate's boy." "Grandson," Wade said. "He fixed my daddy's tractor in 1980-something. Wouldn't take a dime either," she said. "Good man." Then she drove off. Wade stood there in the gas station lot with his $8 and his duffel bag. A strange warmth sat in his chest. It had nothing to do with the July heat. That night he slept in the Ranger's cab, seat reclined as far as it would go. In the morning, Wade found a folded 20 tucked under his windshield wiper. No note, just the bill, pinned down by a rock so it wouldn't blow away. He never learned who left it. Not for a long while. He drove out to the lake for the first time 3 days later, mostly out of curiosity. $8 felt like too small a number to just fold away and forget. Pardee Lake stretched wide and green in the July sun, ringed by pine, the kind of quiet that only comes to places tourists haven't found yet. Locals called the flooded cove at the north end the Drowned Mile. That was roughly how much shoreline the 1951 dam had swallowed whole. Wade parked the Ranger at the boat launch and walked the bank until the trees thinned out, until he could see where the water went from lake blue to a murkier green, a green that hinted at something underneath. He couldn't see the mill. Nobody could see the mill. It had been down there longer than his grandfather had been alive to remember it clearly. But the lake was low, lower than he'd ever seen it in photographs. A dry summer, the local paper said, the worst drought since the 80s. Pardee Lake was dropping almost an inch a day. An old stray dog wandered down from the tree line, black and white, ribs a little too visible. It sat a respectful distance away, watching him. Wade had seen the same dog twice now, near his parking spots. Like it had adopted him without asking permission. "You don't have anywhere to be either, huh?" Wade said. The dog didn't answer, but it didn't leave. He sat on a rock at the waterline and pulled the deed out of his shirt pocket, unfolded it carefully, like it might tear if he handled it wrong. Tate's Mill. $8. He turned it over. On the back, in pencil so faint he almost missed it, someone had written 4 words. Handwriting he recognised instantly. He'd seen it his whole childhood, on grocery lists and repair notes, and the backs of old photographs. "The river took the mill, son, but not what I sank under the 3rd stone. Count careful." Wade sat very still, the way he'd learned to. The dog watched him. The lake kept dropping, an inch at a time, toward whatever Earl Tate had buried where nobody could reach it for 70 years. Wade came back to the lake every day after that. He didn't have anywhere else that needed him. He picked up 2 shifts a week at a tyre shop in Elizabethton, forklift work mostly. $9 an hour, under the table. The owner didn't want the paperwork. Wade didn't want to explain why he had no fixed address. It bought gas. It bought the dollar menu most nights. It did not buy a room. By the 2nd week of August, Pardee Lake had dropped 4 feet. The drought had a name in the paper now. A real one. A ridge of high pressure, parked over 3 states like it had nowhere else to be either. Boat ramps sat high and dry. The marina posted a sign limiting slip access. And at the Drowned Mile, for the first time anyone could remember, the water pulled back far enough to expose a strip of cracked grey mudflat. He found the dog again on his 3rd visit. Same black and white stray. Thinner, if anything. This time it followed him all the way to the waterline. "You live out here?" Wade asked it. The dog sat. Wade decided that was as good as a yes. He started leaving half his gas station sandwich for it. Not because he had extra, because $8 was easier to carry when you weren't carrying it alone. It was Hollis Pruitt who found him there. Not the other way around. Wade heard the truck before he saw it. An old Chevy with a cough in the engine, the kind his hands itched to fix on sound alone. It stopped on the gravel above the bank. An old man climbed out slow, using the door for balance. Canvas coat despite the heat. "You're not supposed to be down there," the old man called. "County closed that bank off in 91. Erosion." "Sorry," Wade said, and started to climb back up. The old man squinted at him. Really looked at him. The way people look when a face tugs at a memory they can't quite land. "You got Earl Tate's jaw," he said finally. "Ain't nobody's jaw looks like that but Earl's." Wade stopped climbing. "You knew my grandfather?" "Knew him my whole life. Worked that mill with him. 11 years before the dam came." The old man's eyes went to the water, to the grey flat where the mill race used to run. Something moved behind them. Wade recognised it because he'd felt it too, at the funeral, at the lawyer's table. "Name's Hollis Pruitt, and I'll be double damned. You're Wade. You remember my name? I remember you at Earl's funeral. Little skinny thing in a clip-on tie, standing by the casket like you were guarding it." Hollis came down the bank slower than the boy had, but with a certainty in his steps, like the ground still belonged to him a little. "I heard Dale sold you this drowned pile of rock for $8. He didn't sell it. He gave it to me." Loudly. Wade almost smiled. In front of everybody. "That man," Hollis said and shook his head, "never did understand what his own daddy built." They stood together at the waterline, an old man and a young one, looking at 70 years of lake where a working mill used to stand. The dog came and sat between them. Hollis reached down without looking and scratched behind its ears like he'd known the animal for years. "Your granddaddy poured that mill's foundation himself in 48, Hollis said. "Mixed the mortar in a wheelbarrow. Didn't trust a contractor's batch. Man built things to outlast trouble. I always figured that was on purpose." "On purpose how?" Hollis looked at him a long moment. "You'll see," he said. Which Wade would come to learn was as close as Hollis Pruitt ever got to a straight answer. And also somehow, always turned out to be exactly right. 3 days later, the lake dropped another 8 inches. The roofline of the mill broke the surface for the first time in Wade's living memory. It came up grey and slick, timbers black with 7 decades of silt. But the shape was unmistakable. A peaked roof, a stone gable, rising out of the green water like something surfacing from a held breath. Wade's chest went tight. Not from money, from the fact that he was looking, for the first time, at the place his grandfather used to be a young man. He called Hollis. Hollis came within the hour, canvas coat and all. "There she is," Hollis said quietly. For a second his voice cracked. Wade pretended not to notice. The same courtesy Earl always showed him. By the following week, the lake had fallen far enough for Wade to wade to the mill's threshold. He'd bought chest waders second-hand, $6, at a flea market off Route 11. The dog wouldn't follow him into the water. It paced the bank the whole time, whining low, like it understood something Wade didn't yet. Inside, the mill smelled like a cave, wet stone and old iron, and something mineral underneath he couldn't name. The great millstone sat exactly where 70 years of photographs said it would. A massive grey wheel, taller than Wade, half buried in silt, cracked but intact. The wooden chute that once fed grain down to it had rotted through in 3 places. It hung at an angle, like a broken arm. He remembered the note. "Count careful." Wade counted the millstones. Only one big grinding stone sat in the main chamber. But along the back wall, half buried, he found 2 smaller stones stacked like steps. Sharpening stones, Hollis told him later. 1, 2, and behind them, wedged into a gap in the foundation, a third. His hands found the seam before his eyes did, working blind in the dark behind the third stone. An edge, too straight to be a crack in the rock. An iron panel, rusted nearly the colour of the stone around it, sealed with a latch gone stiff with decades of silt. He worked it loose with a flathead screwdriver, Earl's own screwdriver, from Earl's own toolbox. The panel gave with a groan that echoed off the wet stone walls. Behind it sat a small dark space, no bigger than a bread box. Inside, wrapped in what had once been oilcloth and was now mostly dust, sat a tin box. Wade's hands were shaking when he lifted it out. Not from the cold of the water, From something else entirely. He carried it out to the bank, to Hollis. Some things a man does not open alone. Some part of Wade already understood that this was one of them. Well, Hollis said, looking at the tin box like it was a live thing. Go on then. The lid was rusted almost shut. It took both of them. Wade prying with a screwdriver. Hollis holding the box steady, hands gone spotted and thin, but not their patience. When it finally gave, the hinge screeching, both men leaned in at once. Inside sat a small iron key, black with age, and a folded piece of paper, waxed cloth wrapped tight around it, dry as the day it had been sealed. Wade unfolded it with fingers gone clumsy. The handwriting was Earl's, unmistakably, the same hand from the deed's backside, the same hand from every grocery list Wade had ever watched him write. If you found this boy, the water finally told the truth. There's more below the mill than the county ever knew to look for. Ask Hollis Pruitt what Tate Landing means, and don't let Dale near the third stone. Hollis read it over Wade's shoulder. When he finished, he went quiet a long moment, looking out at the drowned mill like it had just confirmed something he'd waited 50 years to hear. Tate Landing, Hollis said slowly. Lord, I haven't heard those words since 1961. What is it? It's a piece of paper, Hollis said. That's going to make your Uncle Dale very, very unhappy. He looked at Wade. For the first time since the waterline, something like a smile moved across the old man's face. Come on, son. There's a woman at the courthouse annex who's owed a phone call. Hollis didn't drive Wade straight to the courthouse. He wanted coffee first. He wanted to talk. Wade was learning that with Hollis Pruitt, those two things usually happen together. They stopped at a diner called the Copper Kettle on the edge of town. It smelled like bacon grease, and 40 years of the same coffee pot never quite getting cleaned properly. Hollis ordered for both of them without asking. 2 coffees, a plate of eggs to split. A man shouldn't go fight a battle on an empty stomach, he said, even if the battle was still 3 weeks off. Tell me about him, Wade said once the coffee came. Not the mill. Him. What was he like before I knew him? Hollis wrapped both hands around his mug. He looked out the window a long moment, like the answer was parked somewhere out on Route 56, and he needed to go find it. Earl Tate was the kind of man who fixed things before they broke, Hollis said finally. Not after. Before. He'd walk that mill every morning, same route, same order, checking the belt tension, checking the stones, checking the sluice gate. Said a man who waited for something to fail had already failed himself first, just a little slower. Sounds exhausting. It was some days. But that mill ran 22 years without a single day lost to breakdown. Not one. Hollis took a slow sip. Man had a temper. Don't let anybody tell you different. But he never spent it on people. He spent it on machines that didn't behave. And on himself, quiet, alone, where nobody had to watch him work through it. He never raised his voice at me. Not once in 15 years. He wouldn't have, Hollis said. You weren't a machine that needed fixing. You were the one thing in his life he'd already decided was worth protecting instead of correcting. There's a difference. Most men never learn it. Wade turned his coffee cup slowly on the table. Not drinking it, just needing something to do with his hands. Dale says he was a fool. Says he lost the mill because he was too stubborn to take the county's settlement. Dale says a lot of things that let him sleep better. No venom in it. Just a plain tiredness. The kind that comes from watching the same argument happen for decades. Earl took the county's $800 because fighting them in court back then would have cost more than the mill was worth. He knew it. That's not foolish. That's arithmetic. What Dale never understood is Earl did the arithmetic on a longer timeline. 40 years longer, as it turns out. How'd he afford the bonds? $61,000 on a mill hand's wages after the flood? He didn't stay a mill hand, Hollis said. Once the dam took the mill, Earl went to work for the county road department, driving a grader, 6 days a week, 20-some years. Boring work, steady work. Never complained once. Not to me, not to anybody. Just came in Monday, clocked out Saturday, and put a little bit of every paycheck somewhere Dale would never think to look. Why didn't he ever tell me any of this? Hollis was quiet a moment, choosing his words like a man choosing a plank to step on when he isn't sure the floor will hold. Because telling a boy his whole inheritance rides on a drought that might not happen for 30 years isn't a bedtime story, he said. It's a burden. Earl didn't want you carrying his patience around like a debt you owed him. He wanted you to have a childhood first. The plan could wait. It did wait. 36 years. They finished their eggs in a comfortable silence after that. The kind two people share when they've said the important part already. Wade paid for both coffees, over Hollis's objection, using 2 of his last $29. Hollis let him, understanding, the way old men sometimes understand young ones, that some gestures matter more than the money behind them. "One more thing," Hollis said, as they walked back to the truck. "Your granddaddy used to say something, when things got hard at the mill. Said it so often I could probably say it in my sleep." He paused at the truck door, looked back once toward the lake. Though it wasn't visible from where they stood, he'd say, "The water always tells the truth eventually. You just have to still be standing there when it does. Is that what this is? The water telling the truth?" "I believe it might be exactly that, son," Hollis said, and climbed into the truck. The Carter County Courthouse Annex sat 2 blocks off the square in Elizabethton, a squat brick building that smelled like every courthouse Wade had ever been in. Floor wax and old paper, the particular hush of a room where records outlive people. Hollis walked in like he owned the place, which, in a small enough town, was close to true. He'd lived here 81 years. He knew which floor tile was loose and which clerk owed him a favour from 1979. Dolores still worked the deed room? Hollis asked the woman at the front counter. "Retired 6 years ago, Mr. Pruitt." The clerk was younger, maybe 30, with a name tag that said Amanda. "But I can pull whatever you need." "Parcel 409, Wade said. "Pardee Lake, and anything filed under Tate Landing." Amanda's fingers moved over the keyboard, then stopped. She frowned at the screen, scrolled, frowned again. "That's strange," she said. "What's strange?" Hollis said. Not really a question. More a man confirming something he already suspected. Parcel 409 has 2 recorded instruments. A 1968 condemnation notice from the county, which is what shows up if you search the address. Amanda turned the monitor so they could see, but there's a second filing, 1961. A trust reservation, recorded separately, under a plaque called Tate Landing. It's never been superseded. Still active. "A trust," Wade said slowly. "Names of beneficiary and heirs," Amanda said. "Whoever holds this reservation keeps title to the Cove parcel and everything on it, regardless of what happens to the surrounding estate." She looked up at him. "This has been sitting here since 1961. Nobody's touched it." Hollis let out a breath that sounded like it had been held a long time. "Earl filed it the year after the dam flooded him out," Hollis said quietly. "Told the county he'd take their $800 for the mill structure, since that's all they were offering. But he put the parcel itself into trust for his own line, so nobody could ever sell it out from under his people again. Nobody figured it'd matter. County thought it was an old man being stubborn about a technicality." "Why didn't he ever say anything?" Wade asked. "Wasn't anything to say back then," Hollis said. "Wasn't worth a dime to anybody till developers started sniffing around the lake, maybe 8-10 years back." Amanda pulled up a second record, and her frown deepened. "There's a pending purchase option on file too. Coyle Development Group, $2.6 million, contingent on clear title to the whole cove, including this parcel." She looked at Hollis. "The seller listed on the option is Dale Tate." Wade went still. "Dale doesn't have title to sell," Amanda said. "Not to this parcel. He never did. It's been in trust since 1961. He's selling something he doesn't own," Wade said. "Looks that way," Hollis said. "And if Earl's trust is still good, that whole $2.6 million deal dies the day anybody reads this filing out loud." Amanda printed both documents without being asked, the condemnation notice and the 1961 trust reservation. She slid them across the counter like she understood, without being told, that this was a moment that mattered. "You didn't hear this from me," she said, "but the Commission's been asked to fast-track a right-of-way variance for the Coyle project. It's on next month's agenda, consent calendar, item 11. The kind of thing that passes without anybody reading it, if nobody objects." "When's the meeting?" Wade asked. "Third Tuesday," Amanda said. "You've got about 5 weeks." Outside, in the parking lot, Wade held the 2 printed pages like they might combust. "Hollis," he said, "how much is Dale actually walking away with if this closes?" "Coyle's option lists $2.6 million for the parcel," Hollis said. But Dale already sold the house and the farm acreage separate, for his own half of Earl's estate. That's another few $100,000. Easy. Man's been spending money in his head since March. Wade did the math him slow, the way you check a number you don't quite believe. $2.6 million plus what Dale already had. That's almost $3 million, built on a deed he never actually owned. That's fraud, Hollis said. Or it's about to be, the second he signs that closing paperwork. Right now it's just Dale being confident. We have to stop the signing. You have to prove the trust, Hollis said. A photocopy, and an old man's memory won't hold up in front of Coyle's lawyers. Dale's had 11 weeks with a real estate attorney. You've got $8 and a screwdriver. Wade looked down at the papers again, then out at Route 56, at the pickup trucks and the Sunoco sign, and the ordinary Tuesday afternoon moving past like nothing in it had just changed. I've got more than that, he said. I've got the deed, and I've got a strongbox my grandfather sealed into a foundation before either of us knew what any of this would be worth. That evening back at the lake, Wade laid the tin box contents on his truck's tailgate, next to a gas station coffee, next to the last of his $41, now down to $29. The dog lay in the shade of the wheel, well, unbothered, like it had appointed itself supervisor of whatever came next. He read Earl's note again. There's more below the mill than the county ever knew to look for. The strongbox held a key. But what did the key open? He drove into town the next morning. On a hunch he couldn't fully explain, he stopped by First Carter Savings, the same bank his grandfather had used his whole life. The same bank whose calendar hung in Earl's kitchen every year Wade could remember. He asked the teller, a woman old enough to have known the place before it went digital, whether Earl Tate had ever kept a safe deposit box. She checked, then checked again, calling back to someone in the office. Box 141, she said finally. Opened in 1988. Annual rental's been paid every year since. Automatic draft, $40 a year, right up through this January. Somebody's kept that account funded a long time after Mr. Tate passed. Wade felt something cold and strange move through him. Who's been paying it? Automatic draft from a trust account, the teller said, looking at her screen. Tate Family Trust, established 1988. You'd need the key and a death certificate or the trust paperwork to access it. Are you a beneficiary? Wade set the small iron key on the counter. I think I might be the only one, he said. Before he did anything else with the deed, Wade drove out to Pine Ridge Cemetery. Before the bank, before the second tin box. It felt wrong to chase his grandfather's secrets without first standing where the man himself was buried. Pine Ridge sat on a low hill outside town, rows of modest granite markers under old oaks. The kind of cemetery where the newest section still showed raw dirt at the edges. Earl Tate's headstone was plain, grey, unremarkable among 100 others just like it. Earl Wayne Tate, 1938 to 2017. He built what lasts. Wade had chosen that epitaph himself at 15. He'd argued with Dale for 20 minutes over the funeral home's suggested alternatives. He built what lasts was the only phrase that felt like it belonged to Earl, not to a catalogue of pre-approved sentiments. You knew, didn't you? Wade said, crouching by the stone. He ran his thumb along the carved letters, the way he might once have checked a scraped knee for damage that wasn't really there. You knew this whole thing would happen. The lake, the drought, Dale trying to sell what wasn't his. The cemetery was quiet, just wind moving through the oaks. Somewhere down the hill, a lawnmower ran slow circles. Nobody was hurrying to finish. I wish you'd just told me, Wade said. Would have saved me 6 weeks in a truck. He sat with that a while, then answered it himself, the way he suspected Earl would have, if the dead were in the habit of arguing back. No, Wade said finally, out loud, to nobody but the stone and the wind. You're right. If you'd told me, I'd have leaned on it, waited on it, never learned to stand on my own for 6 weeks first. He almost smiled. You always did make a man earn the easy parts. He stayed another 20 minutes, not doing anything in particular, just sitting the way you sit with someone you miss. When there's nothing left to say that hasn't already been said, 100 times, across 100 quiet mornings, fixing a porch step, or a truck engine, or a fence line. On his way out, an older woman was tending a nearby grave, kneeling in the grass with a small trowel, planting something colourful at the base of a headstone 3 rows over. She looked up as Wade passed, squinting against the sun. You're Earl Tate's grandson, she said. Not a question. Word evidently moved even through a cemetery in Cane Hollow. Yes, ma'am. I'm Opal Denny, she said. My husband worked the county road crew with your grandfather. Near on 15 years. Drove grader right alongside him. She sat back on her heels studying Wade with the frank curiosity of a woman who'd buried enough people to no longer bother with small talk she didn't mean. Heard you found something out at that old mill. Word really does travel fast around here. Faster than the Caney Fork ever did, Opal said, the ghost of a smile crossing her face. My husband used to say your grandfather was the most careful man he ever worked beside. Wouldn't let a grader roll 1 inch without checking the blade angle twice. Said Earl treated every job like it might be the last thing anybody ever judged him by. Sounds like him. He used to talk about that mill sometimes on slow days, Opal continued. Never bitter about losing it. That always surprised my husband. Most men who lost something like that stayed bitter the rest of their lives. Earl just used to say the water would sort it out, eventually. Didn't say much more than that. My husband figured it was just a saying, the kind old men repeat about things they can't change. Turns out it wasn't just a saying. Opal studied him a moment longer. Something warm moved behind her eyes. No, she said. I don't suppose it was. Your grandfather struck me as a man who didn't waste words on things he didn't mean to see through. She turned back to her planting, then paused, looking back once more. You tell that story right when the time comes. Man like Earl Tate deserves to be remembered as more than a punchline in his own son's real estate deal. I intend to, Wade said, and meant it more than he'd meant almost anything in the 6 weeks since the reading. He drove back toward the lake that evening, windows down, the September air finally carrying the first hint of a cooler season. Eight's head hanging out the passenger window the whole way. For the first time since the funeral 9 years earlier, Wade found himself thinking about Earl, not as a puzzle to solve, or a debt to honour, just a man he missed, plainly, without complication. The way you miss anyone who was steady and kind and gone too soon. That feeling stayed with him through the weeks that followed, through the courthouse, the bank vault, the mill's dark foundation, a quiet undercurrent beneath all the documents and dollar figures, reminding him, whenever the fight with Dale or the shadow of Roy Denton threatened to make the whole thing feel like a transaction, that it had never really been about the money at all. It had always been about a man who loved him enough to spend 36 years making sure Wade would never again have to wonder if anybody had. The bank required paperwork Wade didn't have, a death certificate, proof of the trust, a notarized letter from the trust's attorney of record, whoever that was, wherever they'd gone in 37 years. It took Hollis 2 phone calls and 1 old favour to find him. Earl's attorney, a man named Sherman Beale, had retired to Florida a decade back. He still answered his own phone. He still remembered the name Tate Family Trust like it had happened last week. Earl came to me in December of '87, Sherman told them over speakerphone. His voice was thin and papery but clear. Wanted a trust set up quiet. Didn't want his son knowing the details. Said Dale would spend it before Earl was even cold. He wasn't wrong, Wade said. He never was about Dale, Sherman said. The trust names Earl's grandchildren as beneficiaries. That skips right over Dale. Lands on whoever comes after him. At the time, that was speculative. You weren't born yet. But the language holds. I can fax the documents to any bank in the state. Inside the hour. You kept a copy for 37 years. Son, I've been paying that man's box rental out of my own account since he passed. Sherman's voice caught, just slightly. Nobody else remembered to. I figured somebody, someday, was going to need what's inside it. Earl Tate was the only client who ever thanked me for doing my job. The fax came through within the hour, just like he promised. Wade sat in the bank lobby, holding pages older than he was. A teller confirmed the trust authority, papers that had slept in a Florida filing cabinet since before Wade's own parents ever met. Box 141 sat in a small vault room, lined with steel doors. The teller inserted the bank's master key. Wade inserted Earl's. Together they turned. The old mechanism ground once and gave. Inside sat a long metal box. Inside that, wrapped in tissue paper gone brittle and yellow, a stack of United States savings bonds. Dozens of them. $50 here. 100 there. Purchased roughly every month, Wade saw as he sorted through the dates, without fail. From 1989, clear through the year Earl died. Hollis did the counting out loud, slow and careful, unwilling to rush a number that deserved respect. $61,000, Hollis said finally. He'd added the last bond's matured value to the running total on a deposit slip. Give or take a few dollars in interest. Man made maybe $12 an hour, running that mill before the dam. And he squirreled away $61,000, one bond at a time. 40 years, never told a living soul. For me, Wade said, it wasn't quite a question. Says right here. Hollis tapped a card tucked in with the bonds. Earl's handwriting again. 4 words this time. For whoever comes back. Wade sat down hard on the little stool, bolted to the vault room floor. He'd had $8 3 weeks ago. He'd slept in a truck the night before last. And somewhere in a filing cabinet, a tin box and a bank vault, a dead man had been quietly building him a life. Since before Wade could walk, he didn't cry exactly. But something in his chest loosened, something that had been clenched tight since the day of the reading. He knew, Wade said. Dale would take the house. Dale would take the farm. Earl knew, and he built something Dale couldn't touch. Man wasn't stupid, Hollis said, just quiet about it. Some folks think those are the same thing. They're not. Dale found out about the trust 9 days later. He did not take it quietly. Wade was at the tire shop, forklift running, when his phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. Dale calling from Brenda's cell, because Dale had blocked his own number after the estate reading. You think you're clever, Dale said. No hello. Straight into it. Filing some 50-year-old paper to try and steal my resort deal. I didn't file anything, Dale. Grandpa did. In 1961. That mill's condemned. Worthless. Everybody in this county has agreed on that for 70 years. Dale's voice climbed. You show up with $8 and suddenly you're the expert. I'm not the expert, Wade said. He kept his voice level, the way Earl always had. The county clerk is. She pulled the filing herself. A silence on the line. It felt like a held breath. You've got until the commission meeting, Dale said finally. His voice dropped, colder now. Coyle's lawyers are filing to have that mill condemned and demolished before the vote. Public safety hazard. Structural failure risk. True enough on paper. Once it's rubble, there's nothing left to argue trust language over. Just a hole in a lake. You'd tear down Grandpa's mill. To save a real estate deal. I'd tear down a pile of rock to save $3 million, Dale said. Don't make this about sentiment, Wade. It never was, for me. The line went dead. Wade stood in the tire shop bay a long moment. The forklift idling. A customer's sedan half raised on the lift behind him. Then he called Hollis. Dale's moving to condemn the mill, Wade said. Before the commission meeting. Says it makes the trust filing irrelevant if there's nothing left standing. Hollis went quiet a moment. Then we've got less time than we thought, he said. And one more thing to find, before he tears it down. Your granddaddy's note said there was more below the mill. We found the tin box. We found the trust. But Earl chose those words careful. I don't think he meant a filing cabinet in Florida. You think there's something still down there. I think Earl Tate didn't pour a granite foundation with his own 2 hands just to hide one tin box, Hollis said. I think he built a place that could hold something heavier than paper. And I think we've got 5 weeks and a falling lake to find out what. Before your uncle turns it into gravel. Wade drove back out to the lake that same afternoon. The bond papers and trust documents locked in a fireproof box he'd bought that morning. 40 of his own new dollars. The first real purchase he'd made since the reading. He found 8 waiting at the usual spot, ears already up, tail already going, like it had appointed itself to keep watch over the mill, even when Wade wasn't there to ask. You're not going to believe the day I had, Wade told the dog, scratching behind its ears the way Hollis always did. The dog leaned into it, unbothered by whether it believed him or not. He sat at the waterline and pulled out his phone. For the first time in 6 weeks, he called someone just to share good news, not to ask for anything. He called Marcus Webb, his old roommate from East Tennessee State. Marcus had graduated the same May and landed, through sheer luck and a cousin in HVAC, a decent job in Knoxville. A lease, a mailing address. You're not going to believe this, Wade said when Marcus picked up. You found a job? Better. I found $61,000 my dead grandfather hid in a bank vault, and I think there's a lot more where that came from. A long pause on the line. Wade. Are you drunk? 1 gas station coffee today, Wade said. Then he told the whole story. The deed, the note, the tin box, Hollis, the bonds. Marcus interrupted every few sentences with a disbelieving laugh, which slowly turned into something closer to awe. Your uncle really gave you a drowned mill for $8, laughing the whole time, in front of the whole family, and it might be worth what now? I don't fully know yet, Wade admitted. But there's a water rights thing, tied to a bottling company lease. Hollis says that alone could be worth more than the house and farm combined. Wade, Marcus's voice went quiet, serious in a way Wade wasn't used to. 6 weeks ago you were sleeping in your truck. I offered you my couch. You said no, because you didn't want to be a burden. I remember. You were never a burden, Marcus said. I'm glad you've got something now besides pride to lean on. Your grandfather sounds like he was something else. He was, Wade said, looking out at the drowned roofline, still mostly submerged but rising a little more every week. I just didn't know how much. Not till the water started telling me. He hung up feeling lighter than he had in months. He sat there a while longer, letting the late sun warm the mud on his jeans, before driving into town to meet Hollis. That dinner became a near-daily ritual over the following weeks, planning the next move, mapping out exactly how much of Earl's patience they'd need to match. At one of those dinners about a week later, Hollis brought up something Wade hadn't considered. You're going to need more than documents when this goes public, Hollis said, setting cornbread on the table. You're going to need somebody the county already trusts. Amanda's good, but she's a clerk. Curtis is good, but he works for the company that owes you money. Folks will wonder about his motives. You need somebody with no stake in this at all. Somebody everybody in Carter County already believes. Like who? Like me, for one, Hollis said. 82 years in this county buys a man some credibility. But there's somebody else too. A woman named Ruth Calloway. Used to be the county's chief appraiser. Retired now. Assessed half the property in this county for 30 years. If she looks at that mill and says out loud what it's worth, nobody's going to argue with her math. Not even Roy Denton. Would she do it? She was sweet on your granddaddy once, Hollis said, with the particular half-smile of a man revealing a secret he'd sat on for decades. Long before either of your grandmothers came along. Never told him. Never told anybody, except me. One night 20 years back, after too much of my late wife's blackberry wine, I imagined she'd take an afternoon if the right person asked her. Deny. Ruth Calloway agreed within a day. She drove out to the mill the following Saturday. A sharp silver-haired woman in her 70s, moving around the foundation with a surveyor's level and a notepad, like she'd never actually retired at all. This is remarkable work, Ruth said, running a hand along the granite. I assessed 40 mills in this region. Never saw a foundation reinforced twice, decades apart, by the same man's own hands. Most people patch what's failing. Your grandfather built for failures that hadn't happened yet. Can you put a number on it? The parcel, the water rights, all of it? Ruth considered the cove a long moment. Doing math Wade couldn't follow. Decades of comparable sales moving behind her eyes. Conservatively, she said, the parcel and its water rights, properly recorded and defended, are worth somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. On their own, before you count the recovered lease payments or the value of a fully restored mill as a commercial property. Coyle Development offered Dale $2.6 million for the cove, without the water rights secured. Their real number, rights included free and clear, was likely considerably higher. Developers rarely offer their ceiling first, so Dale sold something worth less than he thought. And I ended up with something worth more than anybody thought. That, Ruth said, closing her notepad with a satisfied snap, is usually how it goes, when one person does the patient work and another person just does the counting. She agreed, without much persuading, to write a formal appraisal letter and to appear at the commission meeting, if needed. Packing up her level, she said only that she'd been waiting a long time to see somebody prove what she'd always suspected about Earl Tate. Quiet men who build things carefully are usually building for longer than anybody around them has the patience to notice. The demolition notice arrived 4 days later, taped to a stake driven into the mudflat where the old mill race used to run. Wade found it on his morning visit. The dog trotted ahead of him down the bank, like it knew exactly where they were headed. Notice of pending demolition, Structural hazard. Carter County building safety. 30 days. 30 days felt like nothing and forever at the same time. Hollis arrived an hour later. Folding table, 2 lawn chairs, a thermos of coffee strong enough to strip paint. "If we're racing a clock," he said, setting up camp like he intended to stay, "we best not waste the daylight." They worked the mill every day that week. Wade in the chest waders. Hollis directing from dry ground because his knees, as he put it, had retired before the rest of him. They cleared silt from the foundation with garden trowels and a borrowed shop vac. They mapped every stone, every joint, every place the mortar looked newer than 70 years old. "Your granddaddy poured concrete like other men wrote letters," Hollis said, on the 3rd day. He ran a hand along a seam Wade would have walked right past. Careful, deliberate. Every pour meant something. He tapped a spot low on the north wall where the granite met a smoother grey patch. "This isn't original stone. This is concrete. Poured later, after the mill was already built." "How much later?" "Look at the aggregate," Hollis said. "That's a modern mix, I guess late 80s, same time he opened that trust." Wade knelt in the mud and ran his fingers over the patch. Smooth in a way the surrounding stone wasn't. Deliberately smoothed. Like someone wanted it to look unremarkable to anyone who wasn't looking hard. "He built something into the foundation," Wade said, "after the mill was already condemned, after everyone had already written it off." "That's my read too," Hollis said. "Question is how we get into it. Without dynamite, without the county noticing, before your uncle's 30 days run out." They didn't figure it out that week. Or the next. The lake kept dropping. An inch some days. Nothing on others. The drought showed no signs of breaking. The forecast kept promising rain and never delivering it. Wade kept working his shifts at the tyre shop. He kept sleeping in the Ranger. Twice more he found folded bills under his wiper. A 10 one night, a 20 the next. Both times he tried to catch whoever was leaving them. Both times he came up empty. The 3rd time he almost did. It was past 11. Wade had parked at the gravel lot near the boat launch instead of his usual spot in town. He wanted to be close to the mill at first light. He was drifting towards sleep in the driver's seat when headlights swept the lot. Slow. Careful. The kind of driving that belonged to someone who didn't want to be noticed. A man got out of a plain white pickup, a Blue Ridge Pure Springs bottling logo. Faded on the door. He walked to Wade's truck, glanced around once and tucked something under the wiper. He turned to leave. "Hey!" Wade called, rolling down his window. The man froze. "You've been leaving me money," Wade said. It wasn't an accusation, he was too tired and too grateful to make it one. "Why?" The man came closer, hesitant. A heavy-set guy in his 50s, company polo, tired eyes. "Name's Curtis Ledbetter," he said. "I run the plant for Blue Ridge Pure Springs. Down at the cove, you work for the company leasing the water. I work for the company that's been paying rent on water it never should have had rights to." Something bitter moved in Curtis's voice. An old grievance, worn smooth from handling. "I've known about your granddaddy's reservation for 6 years. Found it going through old survey records during a boundary dispute with the county. Never said anything. Wasn't my business. And the man who set up our lease made it real clear what happened to employees who asked too many questions." Roy Denton, Wade guessed. He didn't fully know why the name surfaced. Hollis had mentioned it once in passing, a name from an old ferry crossing family. But Wade hadn't connected it, not until Curtis's face changed at the sound of it. "You know Roy?" "Not yet," Wade said. "But it sounds like maybe I should." Curtis rubbed the back of his neck. Roy Denton set that lease up through a shell company, 9 years back. Told the county board it was above board. Filed the paperwork himself, since he sat on the water board that was supposed to review it. "I've got copies, payment records, everything going back to year 1. A man in my position learns to keep receipts, in case the wind ever changes. Why give them to me now?" "Because your granddaddy fixed my truck once," Curtis said, "back before I had 2 nickels to rub together, and wouldn't take a dime for it. And because I'm tired of watching Roy Denton get richer off a lie while decent people sleep in their cars." He held out a thick manila envelope. "This is everything. 9 years of statements. Proves the lease payments should have gone to the Tate estate the whole time, not into Roy's holding company." Wade took the envelope. His hands had gone unsteady again. The same way they had in the mill. The same way they had at the bank vault Why the anonymous cash? Why not just hand me this weeks ago? Wasn't sure you'd stick around, Curtis admitted. Wasn't sure you'd fight for it. A lot of folks would have taken the $8, felt sorry for themselves, and driven off somewhere else. You kept coming back to that lake every single day. That told me something. He nodded toward the water. Your granddaddy was the same way. Man never quit anything in his life. Guess it runs in the family. He left before Wade could properly thank him. The white truck's taillights faded down Route 56, into the dark. Wade sat with the envelope in his lap a long while. The dog's head rested against his leg through the open window. Then he called Hollis. We need to talk about someone named Roy Denton, Wade said. I think we just found the second half of what's happening to us. Curtis Ledbetter's envelope led Wade somewhere he hadn't expected, back to his own tyre shop, and a conversation with a man he'd worked alongside for 6 weeks without ever really knowing. You're the tape boy, said Ray Sizemore, the shop's owner, catching Wade during a slow Tuesday afternoon. A rag in one hand. A look on his face like he'd been working up to saying something. The one with the mill. Word travels, Wade said. Word travels real fast in this county, especially when it involves Roy Denton looking foolish. Ray leaned against the workbench. I used to sit on a zoning committee with that man. Watched him steer variance requests toward developers who just happened to donate to his campaign the next quarter. Never could prove nothing. Man's careful. You think he's done this before? Not just the water lease? I think Roy Denton's been quietly moving money toward himself for 15 years, Ray said. Nobody's ever had a document solid enough to make it stick. He wiped his hands slow, thinking, you might be the first person in this county who ever handed him a piece of paper he couldn't talk his way around. Wade turned that over on his drive home that night, headlights carving through the dark of Route 56. 8 riding shotgun now most evenings, instead of waiting at the lake. Somewhere along the way, the dog had decided Wade's truck counted as home too. He thought about the newspaper article Hollis kept suggesting. The one Wade still wasn't sure he wanted to write. Putting your family's business in the paper felt like exactly the kind of thing Earl Tate would have quietly discouraged. He called Hollis that night to talk it through. Grandpa never wanted attention, Wade said. You said so yourself. Feels wrong to drag this into a newspaper. Your granddaddy never wanted attention for himself, Hollis said. That's different from never wanting the truth told. There's a difference between modesty and silence. He built a paper trail 36 years deep, son. Paper trails aren't built by men who want things kept quiet forever. They're built by men who want the truth available, the moment somebody's ready to go looking. So you think I should talk to the reporter? I think your granddaddy poured concrete instead of writing memoirs because he trusted actions over words, Hollis said. But he kept every piece of that story on paper, in a vault, waiting. That's not a man asking to be left alone forever. That's a man asking to be believed eventually by whoever needed convincing. Wade sat with that a long moment, the phone warm against his ear, Ate's head resting on his knee. Okay, he said finally. I'll think about it. That's all your granddaddy ever asked of anybody, Hollis said. Just that they think about it properly, instead of laughing first and thinking never. The following week brought its own small complication, the kind Wade was learning to expect now, the kind that arrived right when things felt like they might finally slow down. Dale showed up at the mill unannounced. A Thursday evening. He parked at an angle that suggested he hadn't fully decided he was staying. Wade was alone at the site, photographing the vault hatch again at Hollis's insistence. When he heard the engine, he turned to see his uncle climbing out. No Brenda this time. No lawyer. Just Dale. In a golf shirt, looking older than Wade remembered. You shouldn't be here, Wade said. Not unkindly. Just factually. I know, Dale said. He didn't come closer, hands in his pockets, looking at the mill the way a man looks at a house he used to live in and can't quite place anymore. I used to come out here as a kid, before the dam took it. I don't really remember it. I was too young, but Dad used to talk about it. Said his father built the whole foundation with his own 2 hands. He did. I never believed half the stories Dad told, Dale said. Figured he was exaggerating. The way people do about their fathers, once the fathers are gone and can't correct the record. He looked at the exposed hatch, the caution tape, Wade's photography equipment, carefully staged. Guess I was wrong about a lot of things. Wade didn't say anything right away. He'd learned that from Earl, secondhand through 9 years of watching Hollis practice the same patience. Sometimes the most useful thing a man can do is let a silence sit, long enough for someone else to fill it honestly. "I'm not here to fight you," Dale said finally. "Lawyer would kill me for saying that out loud. I just wanted to see it. Before the meeting. Before whatever happens, happens." "You can look," Wade said. "I'm not going to stop you." Dale walked closer, slow, the way a man walks into a church he hasn't visited in years. Not sure he's still welcome. He crouched by the hatch, peering into the dark space where the strongbox had sat for 36 years. Quite a long time. "He built all this," Dale said, "and never said a word to any of us." "He said plenty," Wade said. "You just weren't the one he was talking to." Dale flinched at that. A small flinch, barely visible in the fading light, but Wade saw it. He didn't take the words back. They were true, and Dale needed for once to sit with something true instead of something convenient. "For what it's worth," Dale said, standing back up, brushing mud from his knees. "I am sorry about the $8. About the whole room laughing. I told myself it was a joke between family. It wasn't. It was cruel. I knew it was cruel while I was doing it. I did it anyway because it made me feel like I still had something to laugh about, with everything else falling apart around me." It was, Wade realised, the closest thing to an apology Dale had ever offered him about anything in 15 years. "Okay," Wade said. "Not forgiveness, not absolution. Just an acknowledgement, plain and unadorned, the way Earl might have offered it himself." Dale nodded once, like that was more than he'd expected to get. He got back in his truck and drove away into the dusk without saying anything else. Wade stood at the mill, a long while after that, 8 leaning against his leg, the vault's dark mouth still open behind him. He found himself thinking, unexpectedly, that Earl might have wanted exactly this moment too, somewhere in all his careful planning. Not revenge, not even justice, exactly. Just one honest sentence, finally spoken, between two men who'd spent too many years pretending the dishonest ones were good enough. He thought about what Hollis had said, about paper trails and men who wanted the truth available. By the time he drove home that night, he'd decided. If a reporter ever came asking, he wouldn't turn them away. Curtis's records changed everything, and changed nothing, both at once. Wade and Hollis spent 2 evenings at Hollis's kitchen table. 9 years of Blue Ridge Pure Spring statements, spread across the oilcloth like a hand of cards nobody wanted to fold. $4,200 a month, wired to an account for Caney Fork Holdings, LLC. The registered agent, buried 3 layers deep in tedious filings, was Roy Denton. 9 years, Wade said, running the total on his phone. $453,600. And every dime should have gone to your granddaddy's estate, Hollis said. If the trust reservation holds, it should hold. Amanda pulled it herself. It's recorded. Recorded's one thing. Hollis tapped the papers. Proven in front of a commission. About to vote Roy's renewal through. That's another. This is a good start, son. It's not a detonator. We still need the thing your granddaddy built into that foundation. They went back to the mill the next morning. And the morning after that, working the north wall inch by inch, testing every seam with a rubber mallet, listening for the hollow sound that would give it away. It was the dog who found it, in the end. On a Thursday, the lake dropped another 6 inches overnight. The mud flat around the mill's north side finally dried enough to walk without waders. The dog started digging at a spot just below the smoothed patch Hollis had flagged weeks earlier. Wade shooed it off twice. The third time he noticed what the dog had already uncovered, a seam in the mud itself, straight-edged, running along the same line as the concrete patch above it. "Hollis," Wade called, "come look at this." Hollis made his way down slower than usual. His knees protested every step, but his eyes sharpened the moment he saw the seam. "That's not foundation," he said. "That's a door." They cleared mud for 3 hours. Hands, trowels, finally a garden hoe borrowed from a neighbour's shed. The shape resolved fully. A poured concrete hatch, 3 feet square, set into the base of the north wall. A rusted iron ring, bolted dead centre, where a handle should be. He poured a vault into his own foundation, Wade said, in 1988. Not knowing if the lake would ever drop low enough for anyone to find it. Knowing it eventually would, Hollis said. Man was patient. Patient men build for decades they won't live to see. It took a pry bar, a length of pipe for leverage, both of their combined weight. The hatch finally gave, grinding on a hinge that hadn't turned in 36 years. The smell that came up was different from the rest of the mill. Drier, mineral, undisturbed. Inside sat a waterproof strongbox, steel, bigger than the tin box from the millstone, sealed with a combination lock. Taped to its underside, in a plastic sleeve gone cloudy with age, sat a small card in Earl's handwriting. June 19th, 51. The year the dam took the mill, Hollis said quietly. June 19th. Wade's fingers shook, dialing the combination. The lock gave on the third try. Inside the strongbox sat a leather folder. Inside that, the original 1961 water rights reservation. The very document Amanda had pulled up on her screen, except this was the physical original. Signed and notarized. Earl's careful signature at the bottom, next to a county clerk's seal, gone brown with age. Beneath it, a ledger, hand-ruled in pencil, tracking every dollar Earl ever put toward the trust. Deposits, dates, cross-referenced. A running note in the margins, simple, repeated. For the boy, 4 solid pages of it. And beneath the ledger, wrapped in the same wax cloth as before, a final letter. Wade, if you're reading this, the river finally went down far enough. Or somebody finally cared enough to dig. Either way works. I built this vault the year I opened your trust. I didn't trust banks to keep something safe for 40 years. And I didn't trust Dale to leave anything alone that had my name on it. Everything you need is here. The deed, the reservation, the ledger. Show it to whoever's on that commission now. Don't apologize for a single dollar of it. You didn't take anything from anybody. I gave it to you a long time before you were born, because I already knew the kind of man Dale would grow into. I wanted somebody in this family to still have something worth keeping. The river took my mill, son. It never took what mattered. Count that as the last thing I ever taught you. Wade read it twice, then a third time, out loud to Hollis. Some things a man doesn't fully believe until he hears his own voice say them. Hollis went quiet a long moment after, looking out at the mill, at the water, at 70 years, finally come round to meet itself. Your granddaddy, Hollis said, was the most patient man I ever knew. I watched him lose that mill. Never once heard him raise his voice about it. I figured he'd made his peace with losing. He shook his head slowly. Turns out he never lost a thing. He just waited. Wade folded the letter carefully. He placed it back with the deed and the ledger. The commission meets in 11 days. Then we've got 11 days, Hollis said, to make sure Roy Denton and your Uncle Dale both understand exactly what's about to happen to them. I know just a woman to help us do it properly. That woman was Amanda, from the courthouse annex. Wade laid the original 1961 document on her counter, alongside Curtis's 9 years of lease statements. She went very quiet, then very fast, pulling up statutes, cross-referencing the commission's own bylaws. She printed a public comment request form and slid it across the counter, something like fierce satisfaction in her eyes. Public comment is open to any county resident, at any regular meeting, she said. Item 11's on the consent calendar. That means it passes without discussion, unless someone formally objects before the vote. You need to file this by Friday. She paused, looking at him with an expression he was starting to recognize, the look of someone who'd just realized they were standing next to something important. Bring the original documents, not copies. Let them see what's actually been sitting in that county's own files for 64 years. Word got around before the meeting even happened. That's how it goes in a town where everyone's cousin works with everyone else's neighbour. By Wednesday, 3 separate people had stopped Wade at the Sunoco, all asking if it was true Earl Tate had left him a fortune. By Friday, the story had grown legs of its own. $61,000 became $600, and $10,000 in the retelling. The tin box became a chest of gold coins, in one version Wade overheard at the tyre shop. Folks love a number better than the true one, Hollis said, unbothered. Let them talk. Talk's free advertising for the truth, once the truth actually shows up. Dale tried a different tactic that week. He sent his own lawyer, a sharp young associate named Preston Cobb, to Wade's tyre shop on a Tuesday afternoon, offering, on Dale's behalf, a settlement. $40,000, Preston said, sliding a folder across the workbench like it was a generous thing to do. in exchange for dropping any claim to the parcel, letting the demolition and the coil sale proceed. Mr. Tate feels this is more than fair. Wade wiped his hands on a shop rag before answering, mostly to buy himself a second to keep his voice level. $40,000 for a parcel about to be worth $2.6 million. The trust's validity hasn't been tested in court, Preston said. There's real litigation risk. Mr. Tate is offering you certainty. Tell Mr. Tate, Wade said, that my grandfather waited 36 years for certainty. I can wait a few more weeks. Preston Cobb left without the signature he came for. Dale, according to Hollis, who heard it from Amanda, spent that whole evening on the phone with Coyle's attorneys, trying to explain why his $3 million deal now had an asterisk the size of a lake. Roy Denton made his own move 2 days later. Quieter, considerably more dangerous. Wade got a call from the Carter County Building Safety Office. An emergency structural inspection had been scheduled for the mill, at Commissioner Denton's request, citing public safety, ahead of the full rains. If the inspector found the structure imminently hazardous, it could be condemned and cleared within 72 hours. Trust dispute or no trust dispute. He's trying to make it disappear before the meeting, Wade said, standing at the lake's edge with Hollis watching a county truck already parked on the access road. Then we make sure it doesn't disappear before we've documented every last thing inside it, Hollis said. Get your phone out, son. Photograph everything. The vault, the hatch, the strongbox. All of it, in place, before anybody official shows up with a clipboard and an opinion. They spent the whole afternoon photographing the mill. Every angle. Wade climbed back into the chest waders one more time to capture the hatch still open, the strongbox's resting place, the smoothed concrete patch Hollis had first spotted weeks earlier. Amanda drove out on her lunch break to notarize a written statement. Exactly what they'd found. And where. Time-stamped and witnessed, in case the evidence vanished under a bulldozer before anyone official cared to look. The inspector came the next morning, a tired county employee named Griggs, who clearly wanted no part of whatever fight was happening around him. He walked the site for 40 minutes, took his own photographs, delivered a verdict that surprised everyone but Hollis. Structures compromised, no question, Griggs said, filling out his form on a clipboard. But it's not imminent collapse. I've seen worse left standing another year. I'm not putting my name on an emergency order for something that survived a lake for 70 years without falling down. Commissioner Denton's office specifically requested urgency, the county attorney's assistant pointed out. Commissioner Denton's office can request whatever it wants, Griggs said, not looking up. I put my name on what I actually see. What I see is a mill that's been standing a long time, and isn't in a hurry to stop. It wasn't a victory exactly. The demolition notice still stood. 30 days and counting. But it bought time, and time, Wade was learning, was the only currency that mattered right now. That same week, Curtis Ledbetter called with something else entirely. There's a woman you should talk to, Curtis said. Name's Diane Ferris. Used to be Roy Denton's office manager. Back when he first set up Caney Fork Holdings. Left the job 8 years ago, hasn't spoken to him since. I ran into her at church last Sunday. She's been carrying something a long time. I think she's ready to put it down. Diane Ferris agreed to meet Wade and Hollis at a diner off Route 19, 2 towns over. The kind of neutral ground people choose when they are about to say something they've been avoiding for years. Roy didn't just structure the lease, Diane told them, hands wrapped tight around a coffee cup she never drank from. He drafted the whole thing himself, on county letterhead, then had it retyped on plain paper before it went to the board, so nobody would ask why a commissioner was doing paperwork for a private company. I typed that first draft. I know exactly what it said. I'm the one who typed his name into the registered agent field, then watched him tell the board it was a blind trust, no county connection. Would you say that in front of the commission? Wade asked. Diane was quiet a long moment, looking down at her coffee. I've got 2 kids in this county's school system. Roy Denton's got friends on the school board too, she said. I've been scared of that man for 8 years, but I've also watched him take money that should have gone to your family, while I sat there knowing it, saying nothing. I'm getting real tired of being scared. She looked up. I'll write a statement. Notarized, I'll sign it. Whether I stand up in that room and say it out loud, that I need to think about a little longer. It was enough for now. Wade thanked her. He drove back to Cane Hollow with one more document in the folder, one more thread pulling Roy Denton's carefully built, quiet apart. The days kept counting down. The lake kept dropping. Somewhere in the space between Dale's settlement offer, Roy's inspection order, and Diane Ferris's shaking hands around a coffee cup, Wade began to understand something. Something Hollis had been trying to tell him since the first day at the waterline. His grandfather hadn't just hidden money in a foundation. He'd built a case, patient stone by patient stone, and left it for Wade to finish assembling, exactly when it would matter most. 4 days before the meeting, the story reached the local paper. A reporter named Janice Whitlow called Wade's cell, wanting to run something before Item 11 got buried on a consent calendar again. Wade agreed, and the piece ran above the fold, the drowned roofline visible for the first time in most readers' living memory. Janice had done her own digging too. She found Roy Denton had reported no outside business interests for 9 straight years on his state ethics disclosure. A flat denial, sitting beside the LLC filing bearing his name. By morning, the ethics board had opened a preliminary inquiry. Dale, meanwhile, was unravelling in a smaller way. Coyle's attorneys, spooked by the coverage, froze the deal for 90 days. Dale had already put a deposit down on a lake house 2 counties over, banking on money that might never come. Then came one last complication. From Sherman Beale in Florida, Earl's Trust required the beneficiary to formally claim the property within 90 days of learning it existed. If the clock started at Earl's death, Wade was 9 years past deadline. If it started when Wade actually learned of it, he was well within his window. Sherman drafted a formal notice of claim that afternoon, dated to the moment Wade first read Earl's note, with Hollis witnessing the date. He faxed it to Amanda for recording, before anyone else could define the timeline for him. By Monday night, every document sat tabbed and ordered in the leather folder. Hollis found Wade at the kitchen table past midnight, still checking, the strongbox closed beside him like a patient old friend. "Get some sleep, son," Hollis said. "You've done everything a man could do. Tomorrow you just have to say it out loud. What if I freeze?" "You've been talking this whole time," Hollis said. To me, to Amanda, to that reporter. "You already know how to say it. Tomorrow you just say it to a bigger room." He closed the folder gently. "Your granddaddy talks plenty, in his own way. He just did it with concrete and 36 years of patience. You've got both now. Use them." Wade slept better than he expected. He woke Tuesday to a sky scrubbed clean by overnight rain, the first real rain in 11 weeks, as if the drought had decided its work was finished. Hollis drove him to the courthouse annex that same rain-washed Tuesday morning. One final stop before the meeting. Amanda stamped a certified copy of every document in the folder, in case the originals ever needed to stay locked in a safe, rather than travel to a podium. "Belt and suspenders," Amanda said, running each page through the machine. "Your grandfather would approve." Man clearly never trusted a single copy of anything. "He trusted concrete," Wade said. "Paper less so." Amanda smiled at that. She handed him the fresh stack, still warm from the copier. She wished him luck, in a voice that made it sound like she meant it, rather than said it out of habit. The 11 days before that morning had moved slower than any Wade could remember, slower than the 6 weeks in the truck, slower than the 9 years under Dale's roof. He filed the public comment request himself, in person, at the courthouse annex. Amanda watched over his shoulder like a woman guarding something precious. He kept the strongbox in the ranger's cab now, wrapped in a blanket on the passenger seat. He slept with one hand near it every night. He couldn't have said what he thought might happen to it. Dale called twice more that week. The first time, he tried reasoning, reminding Wade how much he'd been given growing up. The roof, the meals, the ride to school. "I raised you for 9 years, Dale said. The least you could do is not blow up my deal." "You didn't raise me," Wade said. "You housed me. Grandpa raised me. There's a difference. I think you know it." The second call, Dale didn't bother with reasoning at all. "Coyle's threatening to pull out entirely," Dale said. "You understand what you're doing to me. $3 million, Wade. Gone. Because you want to play detective with an old man's paperwork." "It's not paperwork, Dale. It's a trust. Legal since before either of us was born." "It's spite," Dale said. "You punishing me for things that happened when you were a kid." Wade was quiet a moment. He thought about the porch step Earl fixed the week his parents died. He thought about the clip-on tie at the funeral, the old man crying near the back of the church, the folded 20 under his wiper, on a night he had nothing. "No," Wade said finally. "It's not spite, it's just true. Grandpa built something. You spent 30 years pretending it wasn't there. Easier than admitting he was smarter than you thought." Dale hung up without another word. Wade understood somehow that this had landed harder than anything he could have shouted. Roy Denton never called at all. Hollis said that was more telling than if he had. Roy's the kind that only shows up in person when he thinks he can still win, Hollis said. The night before the meeting at his kitchen table, the strongbox contents spread out one final time. If he's staying quiet, it's because his lawyer told him to. If his lawyer told him to, it's because his lawyer's already looked at what we've got and doesn't like it. "What if it's not enough?" Wade asked. First time he'd said the fear out loud. Hollis looked at him a long moment. "Son, your granddaddy sank a vault into solid granite. Waited 36 years for a drought to give it back. I don't believe for 1 second he did all that work for nothing." He tapped the leather folder. "Read your letter again if you need to." He wasn't guessing. He was certain. "Borrow some of that tonight. You've earned it." The Carter County Commission met on the third Tuesday of September. The meeting room held maybe 80 people on a good night. This Tuesday, it was packed past fire code. Word travels fast in a small town, and word this good travels faster than most. Wade sat in the second row, the leather folder in his lap. Hollis beside him, in a press shirt he'd clearly saved for occasions exactly like this one. Curtis Ledbetter sat 3 rows back, still in his company polo, having driven 40 minutes straight from his shift. Amanda sat near the clerk's table, professionally neutral. She caught Wade's eye once and gave the smallest possible nod. Dale and Brenda sat near the front, close to where Roy Denton sat at the commission dais, gavel resting in front of him, a man who'd used it 1,000 times and expected 1,000 more. The meeting opened with the usual business: a budget line item, a road resurfacing bid, a car wash zoning variance that ate 11 minutes nobody in the room cared about. Then the clerk read the consent calendar. "Item 11, she said. Right-of-way variance, Coyle Development Group, Pardee Lake Cove parcel. Recommend approval as filed." Motion to approve the consent calendar. "As read," one commissioner said, already reaching for her water glass. "Second," said another, barely looking up. Roy Denton's gavel lifted an inch off the table. "Mr. Chairman," Wade said, standing. His voice came out steadier than he expected, steadier than it had any right to be. "I'd like to be recognised for public comment on item 11. Roy's gavel paused. His eyes found Wade for the first time. Something flickered there, quick and unreadable, before settling back into practiced boredom. "Public comment on consent items is unusual," Roy said, "but the county does allow it. You have 3 minutes. Wade walked to the podium. He set the leather folder down, opened it slow. The room, restless a moment ago, went quiet just watching him do it. "My name is Wade Tate," he said. "My grandfather was Earl Tate. He owned the mill that used to stand where item 11 proposes a variance." He paused. "In 1961, my grandfather recorded a trust reservation on that parcel, naming his heirs as beneficiaries. That reservation has never been superseded, never sold, never transferred. It's still on record at this county's own clerk's office." A murmur moved through the room. Roy's face didn't change, but his knuckles resting on the dais went a shade paler. "The parcel item 11 proposes a variance for," Wade continued, "is not owned by Dale Tate. It is not available for the Coyle Development purchase option. It is held in trust for Earl Tate's grandchildren." "That's me." "This is a matter for civil court," Roy said. Smooth, practiced. The voice of a man who'd talked his way out of worse rooms than this one. Not a commission meeting. "I'd suggest the young man consult an attorney, rather than disrupt county business with an unverified family dispute." "It's verified," Amanda said, from her seat by the clerk's table. "Before anyone could stop her. I pulled the filing myself 3 weeks ago. It's recorded. Book 44, page 211. I can have it on the overhead in 90 seconds, if the commission wants to see it." The chairman, a heavy-set man named Purcell, glanced between Amanda and Roy. He looked like a man realising his evening had just gotten longer. "Put it up," Purcell said. The document appeared on the projector screen a moment later. Earl's careful 1961 signature, enlarged for the whole room, the county seal, the recording stamp, all of it exactly as real as 64 years of undisturbed filing could make something. "There's more," Wade said into the silence that followed. He pulled the second document from the folder. "This is a lease agreement between Caney Fork Holdings, LLC, and Blue Ridge Pure Springs Bottling, water access to the same parcel. 9 years of payments, $4,200 a month, $453,600 total." He looked up, directly at Roy Denton for the first time. Caney Fork Holdings' registered agent, his Commissioner Denton. The room did not gasp exactly. It did something quieter, a collective intake of breath. Then a silence so total Wade could hear the projector fan humming. "That's a baseless accusation," Roy said, but his voice had lost its smoothness, edges showing through where the practiced calm used to be. "It's a matter of public record," Wade said. "Curtis Ledbetter is here tonight. He runs the Blue Ridge Pure Springs plant. He has 9 years of payment records. He's prepared to speak to this commission about who structured that lease and why." Curtis stood from his seat 3 rows back. He didn't say anything yet. He didn't need to. Just the sight of him standing, in his company polo, holding a thick manila folder of his own, said enough. Roy Denton's face had gone the colour of old paper. "I move," said a commissioner near the end of the dais, a woman who'd said almost nothing all evening, "that item 11 be pulled from the consent calendar, and that this commission refer Commissioner Denton's registered agency with Caney Fork Holdings, LLC, to the county attorney for review." "Second," said the water glass commissioner, no longer bored at all. "All in favour," Purcell said. The vote passed unanimously, 5 hands raised, including, after a long pause that told its own story, Roy Denton's own. A man drowning in a room full of witnesses learns fast. The only thing worse than voting against himself is being the only no. Dale sat frozen in the 3rd row. Brenda's hand gripped his arm. Both of them stared at the projector screen, like it might, if they looked hard enough, reveal itself to be a mistake. It did not reveal itself to be a mistake. The chairman gavelled the meeting toward its next item, but the room didn't fully settle, not for several minutes. People leaned toward each other, whispering. A few even turned to look at Wade with something that might have been respect, or might have just been the particular hunger small towns have for a story this good. Wade closed the leather folder and walked back to his seat. Hollis, without a word, put one hand briefly on his shoulder, the way Earl might have, if Earl had lived long enough to see it. Hollis drove Wade home from the meeting that night, both of them quiet for the first several miles. The truck's headlights swept familiar curves along Route 56, curves that felt somehow different than they had that morning. "You did that clean," Hollis said finally, eyes on the road. "Your granddaddy would have been proud of how steady you kept your voice in there. I was shaking the whole time, just kept my hands under the podium." "That's the trick," Hollis said. "Man doesn't have to feel steady, he just has to look it, long enough for the truth to land." He glanced over, something warm and tired in his face. "You did that. Earl couldn't have done it better himself. And I watched that man handle harder rooms than a county commission meeting." They pulled into Hollis's driveway a few minutes later and sat in the truck a moment longer, engine ticking as it cooled, neither in a hurry to go inside just yet. "What happens now?" Wade asked. "Now," Hollis said, "the county does what counties do. Slow, careful, mostly paperwork, and you get to do something you haven't done in 3 months." "What's that?" "Rest," Hollis said. He meant it. For the first time since the folding chair in the lawyer's office, Wade let himself believe that resting might actually be possible. The weeks after the meeting moved fast, the way things do once a dam finally breaks somewhere other than a river. The county attorney's review confirmed within 10 days what everyone in that room already understood. The 1961 trust was valid, recorded, unbroken. The Coyle development purchase option, contingent on title Dale never held, collapsed entirely. Coyle's attorneys withdrew from the county altogether, rather than risk further scrutiny. Dale's Lake House deposit was gone within the month, forfeited, once Dale couldn't close on financing tied to a sale that no longer existed. Brenda moved back in with her mother in Kingsport by October. The same grapevine that had carried the story to Wade in the first place carried that too. Roy Denton did not run for re-election. He resigned his commission seat 2 weeks after the meeting, ahead of a formal ethics finding that would have removed him anyway. The State Comptroller's Office opened a recovery action against Caney Fork Holdings for 9 years of misdirected lease payments, plus interest. Wade's attorney, a young woman named Priya Anand, expected it to settle within the year. Diane Ferris finally did stand up in the end, at a follow-up hearing 2 weeks after the first. By then, the Ethics Board had opened its file. Word had gotten around that Roy Denton's career in Carter County was effectively finished. She read her statement in a voice that shook for the first sentence and steadied by the third. The retyped lease, the registered agent field, the blind trust that was never blind at all. When she finished, nobody in the room laughed. Nobody looked away either. 2 more people came forward within the month, once Diane's statement made the second page of the Courier. A former county contracts clerk who'd noticed years earlier that Roy's signature showed up on bid documents he had no business signing. A retired schoolteacher who remembered Roy pressuring the school board over a land swap that had quietly enriched a cousin. Neither claim was as airtight as the water rights, but together they painted a picture the state investigators found impossible to ignore. By winter, the Attorney General's office had opened a broader inquiry into Roy Denton's 11 years in office. Curtis Ledbetter, for his part, kept his job at the bottling plant. He got a promotion the following spring. The new plant manager over in Kingsport had heard, through channels nobody could quite trace, exactly what kind of employee kept receipts. The kind who told the truth when it mattered. Some folks think honesty doesn't pay, Curtis told Wade, the 2 of them fishing off the mill's new dock one Sunday the following summer. Took me 9 years to prove otherwise. Man in my position learns patience, same as your granddaddy did. Just took me 9 years instead of 36. $453,600, Priya told Wade, the day the Comptroller's office confirmed the action. Plus statutory interest. That should bring the total north of $500,000 once it's collected. She looked up from her paperwork. Combined with the $61,000 in bonds, and whatever the water rights are worth going forward, you're looking at something near $560,000. Possibly more, once Ruth Calloway's numbers factor in. Ruth Calloway's final appraisal came in 2 weeks after that, more detailed than her first walkthrough estimate. It accounted for the restored water access, the parcel's frontage, and a growing interest from 2 outdoor recreation companies. Word had gotten around that a clean-titled cove with reliable water rights might finally be available for a modest marina lease. One Wade could control and price fairly, on his own terms this time. $380,000 for the parcel and the rights conservatively, Ruth told him. She laid her final numbers across Hollis's kitchen table, like a woman finishing a puzzle she'd started decades earlier. That's before whatever you decide to do with the mill itself as a business. Most young men in your position would sell it all tomorrow and never look back. I'm not most young men, Wade said. I had a good teacher. 2, actually, Ruth said, with a small smile that told Wade she meant Hollis as much as Earl. Don't think I haven't noticed which one still shows up at that mill every single morning. Rain or shine. 82 years old. Just to make sure you're doing it right. He'd deny it if you asked him. Of course he would, Ruth said. That's exactly the kind of man he is. Same kind your grandfather was. This county doesn't make many of them anymore. It should hold on to the ones it's got, a little tighter than it does. Wade thought about that later that evening, watching Hollis from the porch, the old man walking the mill's new foundation slow, one hand trailing along the granite like he was greeting an old friend. Hollis had slowed some that year. Small things. A hitch in his knee that hadn't been there in August. A pause before standing up from a chair, lasting a beat longer each month. Wade never mentioned it. He simply started driving Hollis to the mill himself, most mornings. Rather than let the old man make the trip alone, in a truck with a cough in its engine neither of them had ever quite fixed. You're hovering, Hollis told him once, not unkindly, catching Wade's eye across the work site. I'm driving, Wade said. That's all. Your granddaddy hovered too, near the end, Hollis said. Made it about the truck or the weather, or some errand he'd invented. Never once said the real reason out loud. He looked at Wade a long moment, something soft moving behind the usual dry humour. I always appreciated that he thought I was worth the trouble of a lie that kind. Appreciate it from you too, son, even though we both know exactly what it is. Wade sat with that number a long moment, quietly, without rushing to feel any particular way about it. Grandpa paid $12 an hour running that mill, he said finally. 61,000 of it, one bond at a time. And the rest, Priya said, he built by refusing to let go of something everyone called worthless. Some men leave their families money. Your grandfather left you proof. Proof he was right for 36 years. And made sure you'd be standing there when it finally paid out. Dale reached out only once in November. A text, not a call. That told Wade something about where his uncle's pride had finally landed. I'm sorry, Wade. I should have read the deed before I laughed at it. Wade looked at the message a long time before answering. He thought about the porch step, the clip-on tie. 9 years under a roof that never once felt like home. He thought about Earl's letter. I already knew the kind of man Dale would grow into. He typed back, I know, Grandpa's buried at Pine Ridge, if you ever want to go say that to him instead. Dale never wrote back, but 3 weeks later Hollis mentioned, almost in passing, that he'd seen Dale's truck parked at Pine Ridge Cemetery. Alone. No flowers. Just a man standing at a headstone longer than a quick visit usually takes. Wade let that be enough for now. Some doors, Earl used to say, you leave unlocked without necessarily walking through them yourself. He did add one thing, though, a small gesture he never told Hollis about until much later. He mailed Dale a photocopy of Earl's final letter, the one from the vault, with a single sticky note attached. Read this before you decide what kind of man you still have time to be. He never heard whether Dale read it. He chose to believe he had. Dale sold the house that winter, the one Earl had left him outright. He moved into a smaller place on the edge of town, a modest rental with a carport instead of a garage. Hollis heard, through the same grapevine that carried everything eventually, that Dale had taken a job managing inventory at a hardware supply warehouse 2 counties over. Steady work, unglamorous work. The kind Dale had spent 30 years believing was beneath a man of his ambitions. Whether that humbling ever turned into something like peace, Wade couldn't say for certain. But he noticed, the following spring, a small anonymous donation to the volunteer fire department that had once responded to a grass fire near the old Tate farmhouse. An amount that matched, almost to the dollar, what Dale's settlement lawyer had once offered Wade to walk away quietly. Wade never confirmed who sent it. He didn't need to. Wade turned down every one of the outdoor recreation companies within the month. Instead, he leased a small dock and boat launch easement to a local family who'd run fishing tours on Pardee Lake for 2 generations. At a rate Hollis called embarrassingly generous and Wade called fair. He kept the mill parcel itself and the water rights beneath it entirely his own. The mill itself came back slower, the way real things do. Wade used part of the recovered money to hire a structural engineer, a careful woman named Dr. Adara Bell, out of Knoxville. She spent 2 weeks assessing what could be saved. The verdict, over coffee at Hollis's kitchen table, was better than Wade had dared hope. The granite foundation, poured by Earl's own hands in 1948, reinforced again in 1988, was sound enough to build on. The wheel, the chute, the roof would need full replacement. But the bones were good. Reconstruction took the better part of a year. Wade quit the tyre shop that spring, once the recovery money cleared. He spent the year in work boots, learning a trade with his hands, under the patient direction of a millwright named Otis Faircloth, who'd restored 2 other historic mills in the region. Otis taught Wade more about patience in that 1 year than 4 years of engineering school ever had. There were setbacks. A shipment of milled oak arrived warped from a supplier 2 states over. It had to be sent back and reordered. 6 weeks lost. A hard freeze in February cracked a section of fresh mortar Wade had poured himself, under Otis's supervision. Otis made him tear it out and re-pour it, without complaint. A foundation that can't survive one Tennessee winter, he said, has no business surviving the next 100 years. Wade thought of Earl every time he mixed a batch, testing the water ratio twice, the way the old photograph suggested his grandfather always had, though nobody had ever taught him that habit directly. Some things, he decided, must simply travel in the blood, or in the tools, or in the particular quiet of a man learning to trust his own hands. Hollis showed up most days too, in his canvas coat, unable to stay away. His advice was sometimes invented on the spot, and it always turned out to be right anyway. The dog, who Wade had finally named 8, took up residence on the mill's new porch, named after the price on a deed that changed his whole life. It greeted the work crew every morning like it had personally hired them. Wade paid Otis Faircloth's crew well, better than the going rate. He covered the community college tuition for Otis's apprentice, a 19-year-old named Cody. The kid reminded Wade, more than he ever said out loud, of himself 2 summers earlier. He also set aside a share of the recovered lease money, once it cleared, into a small scholarship fund at the county's vocational school. Named quietly, at Hollis's insistence rather than his own, the Earl Tate Trade Scholarship. 2 students a year, tuition and tools both covered, in Upswati. No essay required beyond one question. What would you build if somebody finally gave you the time to do it right? Ruth Calloway agreed to sit on the small committee that read the answers every spring. It was the least she could do, she said, for a man who'd waited 60 years for her to finally say yes to something. Wade also found, somewhere in that year of sawdust and mortar, a version of himself he hadn't expected to meet. He started sleeping full nights again, first in Hollis's spare room, then once the caretaker's cottage beside the mill was habitable, in a home that was actually his. He stopped flinching. Eventually, at unfamiliar numbers on his phone, he learned slowly the particular satisfaction of a debt finally paid. Not the kind owed in dollars, the kind owed to a dead man's patience. Marcus drove up from Knoxville twice that year, once in the fall to help frame the new roofline, once in the spring, just to see the wheel go back on its axle. He brought his own tools the second time, unprompted, and worked a full Saturday without complaint. Over beers on the half-finished porch that evening, he told Wade something plain. He'd never fully believed the story until he saw the granite with his own hands. "Your grandfather really poured all this himself," Marcus said, running a palm over the cool stone. "Twice," Wade said. "Once in 48. Once in 88, when nobody was looking." "That's not luck," Marcus said. "That's just a man who never stopped working." "That's the whole story," Wade said. "Everybody wants it to be about the money. It was never about the money." The mill reopened on a bright Saturday the following June, 1 year, almost to the day, since a lawyer's office had laughed at a boy with $8 in his pocket. The town came out for it. More people than Wade expected. Amanda and her family, Curtis Ledbetter with his wife and 2 kids, Diane Ferris, steadier now than she'd been in that diner off Route 19, Janice Whitlow, with her notebook, already drafting a follow-up piece in her head, Ruth Calloway, in a hat she'd clearly chosen for the occasion. Sherman Beale flew in from Florida at 83. He'd insisted he wouldn't miss it for anything. He leaned on a cane, but stood straight the whole ceremony through. A hand-painted sign hung over the new door. Tate's Mill, established 1948, reopened. The sign painter refused payment once he heard the story. The same way Wade's own hands had once refused a $20 bill at a gas station on Route 56. The great millstone sat cleaned and restored, visible through a new glass panel Wade had insisted on, so visitors could see the wheel his grandfather ground grain on for decades. Tucked beside it, in a small brass frame case, sat the tin box, the strong box, and both of Earl's letters, preserved exactly as found, for anyone who wanted to see what patience looked like, given enough time. Opal Denny came too, the woman Wade had met tending a grave 3 rows from Earl's. She brought a jar of blackberry preserves. The same kind, she told him, with a wink, that had once fueled a certain amount of Hollis Pruitt's late-night storytelling. Even Preston Cobb showed up, unannounced, standing near the back in a suit that looked out of place among the flannel and sundresses. When Wade caught his eye, the young lawyer gave a small, genuine nod. Wade chose to accept it as its own kind of apology. Hollis cut the ribbon because Wade insisted. 82 years, and 11 of them working that mill beside Earl Tate, had earned him that. Earl would have hated all this fuss, Hollis said into a borrowed microphone. The small crowd laughed, warm and easy, the way people laugh at something true. But he'd have stood right here anyway. Quiet, in the back, just to watch it happen. Shit. So that's where I'm going to imagine him standing today. Ruth Calloway, standing near the front, wiped her eyes once quickly and pretended she hadn't. Wade said a few words himself, though he kept them short, the way Earl always kept his. He thanked Hollis. He thanked Amanda and Curtis and Diane and Ruth. He thanked Sherman too, over a phone line they'd rigged up so the old lawyer's voice could carry from a porch in Florida. He did not thank Dale, and nobody in the crowd seemed to expect him to. "My grandfather built this place twice," Wade said, near the end. "Once with his hands and once with patience nobody else could see. I just got to be the one standing here when the water finally told the truth." He paused, looking out at the crowd. Hollis in the front row, in his good canvas coat. Eight sitting patient by the new door. The whole town that had once heard about $8 and a laugh come a year later to watch a mill grind grain again for the first time since 1951. "People ask me sometimes if I'm angry," Wade said. "At my uncle, at Roy Denton, at however many years it took for any of this to matter." He shook his head slowly. "I'm not. My grandfather wasn't angry either. Not once in 9 years of me watching him. He just built things that could wait. Turns out that's its own kind of answer to anger. You don't need to shout at the people who wronged you if you've already spent 36 years building something stronger than their whole argument." The crowd went quiet a moment. The kind of quiet that comes when a room hears something true and doesn't want to rush past it. Then somebody, Curtis Ledbetter probably, started clapping, and the whole porch joined in. Warm and unhurried, the way people applaud something they've watched builds slowly enough to actually believe in it. Later that afternoon, once the speeches were done and the crowd had thinned to the handful, who always stay longest, Wade found himself alone with Hollis on the new porch, the two of them watching the last visitors wander back toward their cars in the golden early evening light. He'd have liked this, Wade said. Wouldn't he? He'd have grumbled about the fuss, Hollis said, and then stood right here anyway, same as I told them, quiet in the back, watching every single person who came through that door like each one mattered to him personally. Because they did. That was always the thing about Earl Tate. Nobody outside this county understood. He built for strangers as easily as he built for family. Never saw much difference between the two, if he was being honest. I think I understand that now, Wade said. I didn't 6 weeks in a truck ago. I do now. Wade stood at the mill's threshold that afternoon, before the crowd had fully thinned, 8 sitting at his feet, watching people move through the building his grandfather built. The water swallowed, and the drought finally gave back. He thought about the folding chair, the $8, a room that had laughed at him once, a lifetime away. He thought about a stray dog, and a folded 20 under a wiper, and a note in pencil on the back of a worthless deed. Hollis left before full dark, driving himself home slow along Route 56, headlights cutting through the same dusk that had once carried Wade back and forth from a truck he'd called home for 6 weeks. Wade watched the taillights until they disappeared around the bend, then turned back to the mill, its new roofline dark against a sky just starting to fill with stars. The wheel turned once slow in the current Otis Faircloth had rerouted through the restored mill race. Wade watched it catch the last of the light and said nothing at all.